Imagine seeing your own funeral while you're still alive. Your parents deliver heartfelt eulogies, your sister sheds perfect tears, and the whole town believes you're gone. But you're watching, heart pounding, as they mourn the version of you they chose to bury. Why did they fake your death? And how far did the betrayal go? Stay with us. What happens next will leave you speechless. A beep from my phone interrupted my morning coffee. It was a video message from Miss S. Langford, our former neighbor. I hadn't heard from her in years. When I looked at the screen, all I saw was her name. Strange, but it stirred up old memories I thought I'd buried. There was no greeting, just silence and the start of a video. I hit play, curious but cautious. The screen lit up with the image of a Church Street, Albans, the same place my parents used to take me every Christmas for a midnight service when I was a child. The camera slowly zoomed in on the podium. Two people stood there, my mom and dad. Mom was in black lace and pearls, dabbing what looked like tears onto Dad's face. His expression was stern, serious, as he read from the paper with shaking hands. Behind him was a casket. Next to that casket, someone sat motionless. The floral arrangements framed everything perfectly, too perfectly. I froze. Then my dad's voice echoed across the video. We loved her deeply. We did all we could. I could barely see the screen on my vision board. An eulogy. An obituary. For me, may her soul rest in peace, he said. I wasn't dead. I was standing right there, alive in my apartment, trying to breathe. I rewound the video, played it again and again. No change. Their faces never wavered. Their voices were calm, almost rehearsed. They were mourning nothing. My hands trembled as I gripped the sink. I shook my head and muttered, why? Why are they doing this? I hadn't spoken to them in years. They were the ones who cut ties with me, cast me out like I was a disgrace. And now they buried me? In the video, my mother spoke about a tragic accident. My father went on about how I spent my final years alone, struggling to make ends meet. They knew I was alive. They had to. So why? I sank into a chair, the video still playing. It panned out, showing rows of people dressed in black, extended family, neighbors, even my old piano teacher. Everyone believed I was gone. No one had reached out to me. I rewatched the footage, making sure I wasn't hallucinating. Nope. They hadn't just erased me, they'd buried me, killed me off. And it hit me. This wasn't some mistake. This was deliberate. A decision. Once upon a time, I thought family meant safety, loyalty. But that illusion shattered 3 years ago when they kicked me out like trash. Not because I did anything wrong, but because Elena, my younger sister, the so-called golden child, stole $80. From the family business account. And instead of holding her accountable, they blamed me. She was reckless, living a flashy lifestyle. And when things didn't add up, someone had to take the fall. That someone was me. I still remember the exact words my mother hissed in the kitchen. A broken daughter is worse than no daughter at all. My dad didn't even look at me. He just said, "You made us ashamed." The next day, I left. No support, no goodbye. I tried calling, texting, even writing. Nothing. Every door slammed shut. Every person vanished. It was like I had become a ghost, not just to them, but to everyone I ever knew. So I did what anyone would do after that kind of betrayal. I left the country, moved abroad, started over, took a quiet cafe job, kept my head down. I barely posted on social media. I never said my name aloud, but deep down I still hoped that one day someone would call, say it was all a mistake. That day never came. Instead, This funeral video did. I remembered trying to renew an old account last year. The system kept rejecting me. Eventually, I contacted support. They told me the account had been deactivated because the user was deceased. I was formally dead in their records, not just forgotten, erased. That night, I couldn't sleep. I kept seeing their faces, those fake tears, that coffin, the funeral they planned without me. It wasn't just wrong, it was horrifying. So I started digging. I reached out to Aunt Rachel using my mother's old contact list. We hadn't spoken in ages, but when she answered on the second ring, it almost made me cry. "This is me," I said softly. "It's Maya." She hung up. I tried again, then messaged my cousins. Not a single response. No one even reacted, except Sam, the youngest. They'd been close as kids. He finally replied, hesitant. "You're alive?" "Yes." His typing bubble disappeared for a while. Then finally came the truth. There was a car accident 3 years ago, overseas. They said you didn't make it. He went on, saying your family held a closed casket funeral at home. It happened so fast. No time for questions. I dropped my phone. I had never been in a car accident. I didn't even own a car at that time. Anger surged through me. I pulled out every document. I had passport stamps, visa records, rental contracts. No gaps, no accident, no disappearance. I searched the public records office. There it was, Maya Deacon, deceased, July August, cause, vehicle accident, certificate, AF 90, 1327. They faked it. They made me legally dead. And suddenly, it all made sense. The lies, the silence, the disappearance. They didn't just erase me, they needed me gone. Sometimes, the people we trust the most can betray us in ways we never imagined. But the truth has a way of rising no matter how deep it's buried. Have you ever been shocked by something your family did behind your back? Share your story in the comments below. I'd love to hear from you. I sat there staring at the screen, stunned. Not with sadness, but with the kind of quiet, frozen rejection that sinks in slow and deep. They buried me while I was still breathing. And for what? To protect a line? To clean up the mess they didn't want to face? Part of me wanted to stop right there, to pretend this was all just some terrible misunderstanding. But something stronger pushed me forward. I had to know how far this went. And then, oddly enough, I found my answer in the most unexpected place. Instagram. Elaine had recently resurfaced online. After years of silence, she was back posting pictures, smiling at champagne towers and rose fountains. I saw photos from a wedding, Aunt Rachel's wedding. Everyone was there, family, friends, even Uncle Theo, who usually avoided everything. But me? Not a single mention, not a photo. Not even one of those half-hearted "wish you were here" comments. I clicked through the images, eyes scanning for any sign of me. Nothing. It was like I never existed. But then, during cocktail hour, I saw a photo that froze my breath. My dad, standing next to Elena. He was holding a wine glass, giving a toast. The caption? "To the daughter who always brings us pride." It was like a knife to the gut. And in that moment, I realized something even more horrifying. Elena hadn't just taken my place in the family, she had taken my life. I clicked through to a corporate registry. Just a few more taps. My hands were trembling, but I needed to know. And there it was. My trust fund, the college money my grandparents left me, had been transferred to Elena. 6 months after my so-called death, she hadn't grieved me. She'd cashed me in. I stared at the numbers, the dates, signature line. She hadn't just erased me, she profited from it. In one of her newest posts, she stood in a gleaming white gown, sunlight bouncing off the fabric, and she was smiling. Big, bright, flawless, as if her whole life had finally fallen into place. That's when it truly sank in. She didn't just want to replace me, she wanted me gone. And my parents? They handed her everything I was meant to have. I didn't sleep that night. At sunrise, I marched straight into a law office, gripping a folder full of documents. The young lawyer behind the desk blinked at the stack. I placed in front of him visa stamps, housing records, employment contracts, tax returns. I didn't need to say much. He knew I wasn't dead, but legally, I might as well have been. He nodded slowly, gently. The first step is to file a fraud complaint and request the withdrawal of the death proclamation, he said. It would take time, he warned. The process wouldn't be easy, but I had something more powerful than time now. I had proof. I was ready. Before I left his office, he handed me back my paperwork. I'm sorry, he said softly, but we've got a memorial to attend this Sunday. And he was right. That same morning, I got another message. Just a single line from an unknown number. Memorial for Maya, Sunday, Street, Albans. No explanation, no signature, but the address? Real. The church? Real. I sat alone in my apartment that night, lights of the city flickering through the windows. It felt like they were taunting me like sparks waiting to explode. All that time, I stayed quiet. Let them live their fantasy. Let them cry their crocodile tears. But not anymore. Now that I had the truth, I wasn't going to let them mourn alone. If they wanted a funeral, I'd give them one. Sunday arrived, and the streets outside the church were already filling with cars. When I pulled up, people in black wandered toward the front steps, hugging and murmuring, acting like they'd just lost someone dear. I stayed in the shadows, watching them enter. My hands were cold, but my spine was still. The door stayed open just long enough to let in the last mourners. And then I knocked. From a distance, I must have looked like any other guest. Black coat, dark glasses, walking slowly. But inside me was a story. I heard the organ stop playing as I entered the sanctuary. Candles flickered beneath a framed photo of me, the same one they'd used in the obituary. I had been smiling in that photo. The day it was taken, I had just gotten my first job abroad. I had texted my mom the news. She never replied. Now she sat in the front row, holding a lace-trimmed tissue to her eyes, crying like she'd rehearsed it for weeks. Her sobs were perfectly timed. Her shoulders shook with dramatic grace. And next to her sat Elaine, clutching her pearls like they were the only thing holding her together. The priest was just finishing a speech. She was difficult, he said quietly, but we loved her. And though we lost touch, we never stopped hoping she'd come home. My breath caught. Lies. Every word of it. And then it was time. He motioned for everyone to rise in a moment of silence. They lay still. And that's when I did it. The wooden doors behind me creaked open. The noise bounced off the marble floors like thunder. Cold daylight poured in, casting a long shadow down the aisle. One step, two steps, click, click, click. Each footstep echoed. Heads turned. First one, then two, then the whole congregation. Whispers started. Hands flew to mouths. A few people gasped. I walked slowly, calmly, down the center aisle. Every step deliberate. When I reached the front, I removed my glasses, and I looked straight at my mother. Her face went pale, her lips parted. Then she fainted right into my father's lap, knocking his wine glass from his hand. It shattered against the pew. Elena froze. Her fingers twisted in a broken strand of pearls. A champagne glass dropped to the floor beside her, splashing her dress. The priest stumbled backward in shock. No one moved. No one spoke. They didn't know if I was a ghost, a dream, or a reckoning. Maybe I was all three. Sometimes, your absence speaks louder than your presence ever could. But when the truth finally walks in, no one can look away. What would you do if you saw someone walk into their own funeral? Let me know below. I'd love to hear your take. I stood at the front of the church, inches away from the altar, face to face with my own photograph. My smiling face, frozen in time, framed by lilies and soft candlelight. The picture they used for my funeral, the moment hit me like a wave. I wasn't just attending a service, I was crashing my own goodbye. The room held its breath. I turned slowly to face them all, rows of people staring with their mouths slightly open, like they'd just seen the dead rise. In a way, they had. I stepped beside the photo and looked out over the crowd. The hush deepened. No one breathed. No one dared move. It was as if they were afraid any noise might break the illusion or confirm it. And then they spoke. "You may have heard I passed away," I said, voice calm, but strong. "But I'm here today to set the record straight." The walls almost seemed to tremble. A few people looked at each other nervously. Some lowered their heads. A woman clutched her handbag tightly. There was no car accident, no death overseas, no tragedy. At least, not the one I told you. I paused, pulling up the folder I'd brought. There were no remains because there was no coffin, no final goodbyes because I never left. I held up my documents for everyone to see: passport stamps, visas, tax records, flight confirmations. I've been alive, working, paying taxes, renting apartments, taking flights, building a life I wasn't supposed to recover. A hush needed before soft murmurs began. A phone camera light blinked red. Someone was recording. Good. "See these?" I said, flipping to the final page. Signed by an attorney confirming my living status. And here, I carefully held up two halves of a document, my death certificate, torn in two. A few gasps rippled through the pews. I turned toward Elena. Her hands were clenched so tightly her knuckles were wet. She opened her mouth, but no sound came out. And then I turned to my parents. My mom sat snapped, still dazed. My father, red-faced and stiff, avoided my eyes. "Elena," I said, locking eyes with her, "you took more than my place in this family. You took my future, my inheritance, my trust fund. You wore it like a dress to a party, and then toasted to yourself with my father's blessing." Her eyes welled with tears, but not from regret, from panic. I heard someone whisper in the back, "She has proof." Another voice said, "That's a crime." The mood shifted. I stepped closer to the pulpit and placed my documents there, right next to the Bible they'd used to eulogize me. "I wasn't hard to find," I continued. "You all knew how to reach me once, but instead of a phone call, you gave me a funeral." I turned, walking slowly down the aisle, each step echoing with a quiet kind of justice. Then I stopped and turned back. "Dad," I said softly, "you told the world your daughter was gone. Well, here I am, and now you have to face the one thing you feared most from me, a lie." He looked like he'd aged a decade in that single moment. I didn't need to yell. I didn't need to cry. I just let the truth hang in the air like smoke from a snuffed-out candle. I passed by my mother. She looked at me, not with love, not even with hate, just shock. The kind of disbelief that happens when a ghost refuses to stay buried. And, hello? Her pearls had slipped from her fingers, tangled and broken in her lap. I walked out as slowly as I had come in. The silence behind me was deafening, broken only by the sound of the heavy church door creaking shut. Outside, the air felt crisp, like something had been cut clean. The sky was the color of steel, the wind cool against my skin. For the first time in years, I could breathe. I went straight back to the lawyer's office. We filed everything: fraud complaints, trust fund recovery motions, identity reinstatement. It would take time, but I had time now. And more importantly, I had my name back. A few weeks later, news of the case began to surface. Quiet whispers at first, then louder ones. Family fraud, faked death, identity theft. People started calling me cousins, former friends, even Aunt Rachel, who swore she never believed it anyway. But I didn't answer. I didn't need their apologies. I needed peace, and I finally had it. I moved to a quiet place by the coast, bought a small home with big windows, the kind that let in the morning light. Started writing again. I let my days be slow, intentional. I lit candles just because. I smiled at strangers. I let the wind carry the weight of my old name into the sea. And on my desk sits a frame, not the old photo they used at the funeral, but a new one. Now, smiling at sunset, holding the paperwork that brought me back. They buried me, but I came back stronger than they ever imagined. Sometimes the greatest betrayal doesn't come from strangers, but from the people we once trusted with our whole hearts, our own family. This story is a powerful reminder that love, unconditional, is not truly love at all. Maya was erased not because she failed, but because she refused to carry the shame. Her family tried to pin on her, and in their attempt to bury her, literally and symbolically, they revealed the fragile foundation of their loyalty. To be declared dead while still alive is more than a legal tragedy. It's a heartbreaking metaphor for what many of us have quietly endured, being ignored, dismissed, or forgotten by those closest to us. But Maya's story teaches us something invaluable. It is never too late to reclaim your voice. Even in the darkest betrayal, there can be clarity, strength, and a path to peace. For those of us who have felt overlooked or silenced in our own lives, this is a call to rise, to speak, and to remember that we matter. We always have. Have you ever had to fight to be heard by the people who should have listened first? If Maya's story touched you, leave it below or share your experience with us.